I have spoken before with you about being a young adult volunteer for the Presbyterian Church USA, a volunteer mission worker for a year in Lima, Peru. About a month or so into that year, I got baptized. Let me explain what I mean by that. I was living with a host family in El Retablo, a densely populated, well-established Lima suburb, and a few times each week I would go to the local internet cafe a few blocks or so from my house to check my email and to have a Skype call with my friends and family. This was just when Skype was getting started and you could actually use the internet to call a cell phone in the United States from a place like Peru, and I loved hearing people's surprising voice on the other end. I thought you were in Peru. How are you calling me? And now, fast forward to today, and we just take these things for granted. Anyway, that is an aside. I would do that every couple times a week, and my host family always told me never to stay out too late or to always call and let them know, and they would come get me if needed. But one evening, I did stay out until dinner time or so. I personally wouldn't consider it late, but I'm sure if the story was being told by the author of John's Gospel, he would say that it happened at night. At any rate, it was after dark, and I was walking home from the internet cafe on the sidewalk next to a busy street. I remember seeing 3 boys, probably 13, 14 years old, run across the street a few hundred yards ahead of me and feeling uneasy as they kept looking back over their shoulders in my direction. But they didn't stop or come toward me. They kept going in the way they were going. A block or so later, I turned the corner and there they were. They quickly surrounded me. One of them pinned my arms behind my back, while the other 2 took everything that I had out of my pockets as I tried to remain calm. It was not much. It was a wallet with a few bucks and a photocopy of my passport, a cheap Peruvian cell phone, and of course the headset that I used to make the internet calls. It took all of 10 seconds, and then they ran away in the same direction from whence they came. Luckily, this was a baptism with water only, so to speak, not a baptism with fire or a baptism in the blood, if you catch my drift. But actually, the baptism part wasn't over yet. I walked 2 more blocks back to the house and immediately told my host family what happened. So then, my host father quickly took me back outside and we started to look for the guys who had robbed me. I explained that there was no way we were going to find them. They ran away, and I was pretty sure they went back to the other neighborhood across the busy street. But we walked around El Retablo for about a half an hour or so, and my host father nodded at and greeted almost everyone we saw. Eventually, I realized that tracking down my assailants was not the goal. The goal was for the people in the neighborhood just to see me with my host father. He had grown up in El Retablo. He had lived there his whole life. In the same way that after a baptism, the pastor carries the baby up and down the aisles, introducing him or her to the congregation and introducing the congregation to their new brother and sister in Christ, saying, "This is your child. If you see him fall down, pick him up." My host father was basically saying, "This is my son, not just some random American tourist who took the wrong bus. This is your neighbor. he belongs here. He belongs with me and my family. If he looks lost, help him out. If he's getting jumped, protect him. He's the newest member of this family. One of the final steps in the process to become a pastor in the Presbyterian Church is to pass your ordination exams. When I was doing this process, the exams were 3 hours long, during which you had to write essays responding to various prompts and case studies having to do with ministry. And perhaps the classic ordination exam question presents a common scenario in churches. Someone calls the office because a new grandchild or niece or nephew has recently been born, and they want to know if the pastor could do the baptism, even though this is not someone that anyone who is an active member of the congregation knows or has a relationship with. Perhaps the caller's parents went to church there or attended once a long time ago, or maybe they live nearby and were just scrolling through the internet search results for Christian baptism and landed on your congregation. How then should the pastor respond? What exactly is the purpose of baptism? And I would submit that the key to answering that question is the doctrine of the Trinity. Today is Trinity Sunday, and the doctrine of the Trinity is kind of like the church equivalent of the rule of compound interest, or the R value of virus transmission in a community, meaning that on the one hand, it seems sort of simple and common enough, you've heard about it enough to not need an explanation, but on the other hand, none of the experts explain exactly what it means or how it works. So whenever anyone starts talking about it, about the Trinity, your eyes just sort of immediately glaze over. So stick with me. The absolute most important, relevant part about the Trinity to our life of faith is one word: relationship. As Trinitarian Christians, we believe in a God characterized above else by perfect, loving relationship with God's own self. And because God is loving, eternal relationship, God can't help but seek out others to invite into this relationship, to expand this family love that keeps on loving. Christ's kingdom is like an invisible, infectious virus of love that only exists, that only survives because of relationship, closeness, connection, intimacy. So the overall thing to remember about baptism is that it's not a photo op for one particular family unit. It's not about a memory for one individual who decided that they believe in the words of John 3:16 and want to be born again. We believe regarding baptism that you can't commit your life to Christ without committing your life to others. That is what the Trinity means. That is what God's baptism, being baptized into Christ, means. So today we are going to remember our baptisms. And I invite you to be born once again. Be born again, and let us be born dying to the notion that our personal faith is a private matter between ourselves and God. Let us be born again, dying to the notion that being born again is just escaping from hell. Let us be born again, letting our faith make us ambassadors of Christ's kingdom that seeks not the salvation of individual souls, but reconciliation for the entire cosmos. Let us be born again as Christians who strive to make this family a place where all aren't just welcomed, but truly known, believed, valued, cherished. The nature of God as triune, perfect relationship means that when we profess faith in Christ, we are devoting our lives toward seeking true compassion, justice, and peace for every person made in God's image. How on earth are we able to do that? I think the only way is to be reminded over and over again that for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. In other words, since God's very essence is ever-expanding relationship and love, that means God has just as much love for the whole world as God has for Jesus. So if you remember nothing else from today, as you try to remember an event that you probably never remembered in the first place, know this: even on your worst day, through your baptism, God views you as nothing less than equal with Christ, God's Son, with whom he is well pleased.